Good Friday morning. We hope you had a great week. The weather has been great here in West Missouri. The crops are looking great. Our brothers have got some hay put up.
Well, good morning. I have two of the cutest crop scouts I've ever seen with me this morning. My two youngest daughters, Ellen and Jill, and I have them with me because they have helped travel parts of the country this last month as we've been coming to you with our Field Talk Fridays. This week, we're going to switch things up a little bit and we're going to talk about some trends that we have been seeing throughout the Midwest, especially with our double crop soybeans. However, the information we're going to give you, we can apply to all of our crops in all of our different situations. So we're going to jump back down to the boot heel in Missouri, and we're going to talk about some nutrient deficiencies that we have been seeing in these light sandy soils, and even in some of our heavier soils that we're having some nutrient management issues with.
So when we're out and we're trying to distinguish and identify a sulfur deficiency in soybeans, let's talk a little bit about what do we want to look for. So first of all, when we think about sulfur in soybeans, sulfur is fairly immobile, right? So sulfur is a secondary macronutrient. We're going to require about 0.3, 0.35 pounds of sulfur per bushel. So required in a decent amount when we start talking 60 to 80 bushel beans. And so the first sign of a sulfur deficiency is going to be a pale yellowing of the upper leaf surface. Now, as we look at these beans that I'm out in now, we aren't really seeing any signs of sulfur deficiency. But about 7 days ago, we were definitely looking at some sulfur deficiency in the beans. So why are we concerned about that? Well, sulfur is used in many different areas of the plant. It's used with photosynthesis, it's used to help with nitrogen fixation, and it's used to make proteins. And so it's very important as we think about soybeans that we have sufficient sulfur that's going to be available. Second thing that helped us to understand the deficiencies that we were seeing is we're in some really sandy soils, some very, very light soils. And so when we think about sulfur in the sulfate form, which is how plants are going to utilize it, it's going to move through that soil very, very quickly. And we've had a lot of rain down here. They had really good planting early, and then we had a monsoon season that came through. And with that massive amount of rainfall and those light CEC soils, that negatively charged sulfate moved down out the bottom of the rooting zone fairly quickly. So they really almost had a perfect storm. High sands, as we're looking at it, low CEC, low organic matter, due just the structure of their soil itself, going to be giving us then that sulfur deficiency. We went in and we actually did a foliar applied sulfur. It tank mixed really well with them going through and doing their post. And by doing that, we were able to supply sulfur in a form that was plant available and at a time when the plant was needing it, as it was moving very quickly into adding all of these trifoliates. As well as dealing with a few sulfur deficiencies, when we walked the field with the producers last week, we also noted some early season potassium deficiencies. Distinguishing potassium deficiencies in soybeans and corn is fairly simple. It is a mobile nutrient, and so we were looking at those older, those lower leaves on the soybeans, and we started to notice a yellowing or a pale color around the outside of the leaf. Potassium plays a role in regulating the water balance of the plant. Specifically, potassium is found in the guard cells, those small cells around the stomates or the holes in the leaves that allow carbon dioxide to move in. We have to have sufficient potassium in order for those stomates, the openings, to operate appropriately. Early season potassium uptake is going to help us build a nice solid stem and a nice solid leaf structure, whether you're looking at corn or soybeans. And also it has a key component in test weight. There's multiple areas of research that have demonstrated the fact that potassium can help us to maintain or even bump up our test weight. And while oftentimes we think about our bushels as being a volume, we really are selling weight. And so we want to make sure that we are maximizing our test weight. So why were we here dealing with a potassium deficiency? Well, potassium does have a single positive charge. However, when we're dealing with soils like this really light sand, the ability for that soil to hold on to nutrients is really reduced. And so we were seeing a reduction in that holding capacity due to the structure of the soil. So when we came in, we visited about what is your fertility program? How much potash are you putting on, right? The 0060. But at this this point, it was more, what can we do to make sure that you have potassium available to your plant right now? We came in and we recommended a potassium acetate product. Why did we talk about potassium acetate? Well, not all foliar potassiums are created equally. Potassium acetate is more than 4.5 times more available than other types of foliar potassium. So as we are thinking about making recommendations for our producers, at AgX we are driven by using science to back up and help us make recommendations. This field, we came in with a sulfur, we came in with a potassium, and we came in with a micronutrient package, all in order to support the growth and the factory development of these double crop soybeans. The last recommendation we made to this producer was the use of an early season PGR. Specifically, we placed Architect at 1 quart to the acre on this field. The reason we came in with Architect is Architect does a couple of key things for our plants. It helps to reduce stress, it helps to increase nutrient mobilization, and it helps us to drive a plant factory. Specifically, when we think about soybeans, we want to make a selection that will drive the formation of nodes. Because when we think about where does our yield come from in soybeans, the University of Nebraska in 2004-2005 published a paper that demonstrated that the impact on soybean yield was greatly influenced by pod count. Well, where do pods come from? They come from the flowers at nodes. And so as we look at this plant moving into the V6, we want to make selections that are going to drive node formation. Because at a node, we can have the formation of another branch, a secondary branch, or we can have the formation of a flower. We either want to increase our branching to increase our node count, and we want to be setting flowers in a timely fashion. Architect is going to allow these plants to move in, set their nodes, and then also set the number of potential flowers and pod counts to help maximize our return on investment and the yield that you're going to see in your yield monitor in a couple of months.
I think it's so important when we look at crop production and we're making agronomic decisions that we're making sure we are educated in the decisions that we're going to make. As we continue with our Field Talk Fridays, we're going to continue to delve into the science of crop production with the idea that we can educate ourselves in order to make the best decisions for your fields.
Have a great week and be safe.